Pop culture usually presents the American West as a single cinematic image, the lone cowboy braving a dusty wind. The historical frontier was more expansive. It encompassed a massive stretch of the 19th century and millions of square miles of diverse territory, from mining camps to railroad settlements. This vintage map illustrates the scale of those Western territories. Manifest Destiny suggested the United States had a specific mission to expand across the continent. The government secured these lands through formal purchases, international treaties, and direct military action. While expansionists described this as an empty wilderness, these territories were already occupied by established nations. This historic photograph shows a Native American family outside their traditional home. Nations like the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Comanche operated their own governments, economies, and cultures long before the arrival of American settlers. The discovery of gold in 1848 triggered a sudden mass migration. Thousands of people traveled west almost overnight, seeking immediate wealth. These new mining boomtowns caused significant environmental damage and created immediate, violent friction with the native communities, whose land and resources were being seized. This sudden quest for mineral wealth established a pattern of indigenous displacement that continued for decades. In reality, the cowboy was a low-paid laborer. The job involved the dangerous and exhausting work of managing cattle across hundreds of miles of open range. Cowboy culture, seen in the equipment and clothing in this photo, was heavily influenced by Mexican vaqueros. The workforce was also diverse, with black cowboys playing a significant role in the cattle industry. Cattle drives meant surviving intense heat, difficult river crossings, and the constant threat of stampedes. These men operating a railroad handcar represent the industrial force that changed the West. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869 accelerated both American settlement and the loss of native lands. Railroads transformed the West into a connected part of the national economy, shifting the balance of power permanently away from indigenous nations. The expansion of tracts and settlements led to the Plains Wars, a series of military conflicts between the U.S. government and native nations resisting the loss of their independence. In 1876, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, seen here, led his troops into the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Native American forces achieved a major tactical victory, defeating Custer and his immediate command. Following the battle, the U.S. military increased its pressure, eventually forcing native nations onto the reservation system. This campaign of displacement and broken treaties reshaped native cultures and left a legacy that continued for generations. As frontier towns grew, they established storefronts, local governments, and law enforcement. Most communities focused on developing courts and municipal systems to manage their growth. Newspapers and dime novels transformed figures like Billy the Kid into legends. While these outlaws committed real crimes, their reputations were often manufactured for audiences in the East. Lawmen like Wyatt Earp became famous for violent incidents like the OK Corral gunfight. However, these brief shootouts were rare. The daily reality of the West was defined by labor and commerce. The West was built by a diverse population, women running local businesses, Chinese immigrants building railroads, and families farming in harsh conditions. The stability of these towns relied on the persistent work of these laborers and merchants rather than the actions of gunfighters. By 1890, the U.S. Census Bureau declared the frontier line closed. Industrial agriculture, railroads, and growing cities now covered the territories. As the physical frontier disappeared, the myth began. Promoters like Buffalo Bill Cody created traveling shows that presented a dramatic, stylized version of Western history to the world. This comparison shows how dime novels and later movies replaced the reality of ranch work with a heroic narrative of good versus evil. The Wild West is a story created afterward, a form of nostalgia that obscures the violent reality of industrial expansion. The landscape was rapidly integrated into a national grid of railroad tracks, telegraph lines, and fences, ending the independence of these sovereign nations. The growth of courtrooms, merchant networks, and municipal police established a rigid administrative order across the former frontier. Rapid economic and technological shifts integrated the region into the global market, replacing isolated homesteads with modern industrial systems. This process secured the borders of the modern United States, but it was achieved through the systematic removal of native peoples and the transformation of the natural environment.